Hello everybody, this is Ronnie Bizzle coming to you with this week's episode of Confessions of a Low Limit Professional Poker Dealer. And in this episode, I'm going to give you 3 stories of my first year of dealing poker. So stay tuned. So the day was May 5th, 2005. That's when I got hired. I remember the first week I was hired, I actually didn't deal a single hand. I actually was the cashier. We had a little cashier area in the back of the poker room, and I would cash out people out. And dealers would come and cash in their chips, and I would pay them out. And it was kind of frustrating at first because I was like, these guys are making money as a dealer. I mean, what am I doing? I'm a cashier. I'm not dealing poker. When am I going to deal? So for a week I was a little frustrated, but I got through it. And then I remember the following Thursday I got to deal for the first time. I came in, so far as told me where I was going. I pushed in, dealt for 30 minutes, and I was pushing pots, and I was getting tipped. And unlike my audition where I had to give my tips back to the dealer I was pushing out, this time I got to keep every dollar I made. So that was kind of cool. So after the first down, which I was super nervous, and I got pushed to another table, and I did a no limit table, and I got through that. And I remember going to my break, and I remember looking at my pouch, and I counted my chips. I think I can't remember the exact, I think I made $30 or whatever. And I was like, wow, I made $30 in like an hour just dealing cards. And I thought, wow, I'm probably gonna make like $200-300 tonight. If I can make $30 in an hour, if I deal for 8 hours, I'll make $240, right? That's not how the industry works. After 5 hours, I got let go because games were, I didn't a lot of dealers, so I got sent home. And I looked at my pouch. I was like, wow! I counted my chips. I said I made $126. $126 dealing poker in 5 hours. What is that? $25 an hour, something like that. I couldn't freaking believe it. I mean, I remember driving home thinking, wow, I made $126 in 5 hours. If I continue to work and work, I work even more hours, if I work my full shift, I'm going to make like $1,000 a week doing poker. Turns out that's not how it goes, because I think the next day I came in and I worked like, I came in Saturday and I worked 4 hours. And I think I made like $100. That's still pretty good money. It's $25, but I only worked 4 hours. So I was like, man, why am I working 4 hours? Well, then I realized, I'm low on the totem pole. I was an extra board, which is kind of like part-time. So the full-time dealers got to stay and I got to go home. And that kind of sucked. But I was thinking on the bright side, if I ever have a shift where I work 8 hours, I'm gonna make all this freaking money. I'm gonna make all kinds of money. So as I learned along the way that the more hours you work, the more money you'll make, generally speaking. And I learned that throughout my years that, you gotta deal to make the money, you gotta work, and I learned that. And now 12 years later, I work, my average shift's about 6 to 8 hours, and I'm making decent money, not great money. I mean, times are slow in the poker industry right now. It's not as busy as it was when I started, 2005, which was right at the peak of poker, right at the very, very pinnacle of what poker was, all over TV. So I was making good money back then. So yeah, that's story number 1. My first day of dealing poker, $126. Who knew? Second story I'm gonna tell you about is a real funny story. After that week I worked during swing shift. 2 weeks later, it was 2 weeks later where I had to work graveyard for a week. And let me tell you, I've never worked graveyard in my life. I mean, before that I was in the military, I worked day shift. Sometimes I worked swing, but I never actually worked graveyard. And I remember I had to come in at 2 a.m. for a week. And it sucked. It totally screwed my work schedule, my sleep schedule. And the fact that I wasn't really making any money. I would come in at 2 o'clock and I would deal a game for like an hour, and then the game would break, and then I would have to sit around till like 8 o'clock in the morning and just sit there and not deal, not make any money, and it sucked. And I remember during that week, I had 3 days where I worked 2 a.m. and I think I made a total of $240. So it really, really sucked. And I remember every time I would come in at 2 and the game would break like an hour or so after I would come in. And I had the supervisor help this person clean up the poker room. You know, we would brush, you know, pick up the empty water bottles or glasses, bring it to the bar, you know, clean up a little bit. And I remember when we were all done, and this happened every single day, like every single time at about 5 a.m., the supervisor would be in the back and I would be just sitting, and the supervisor would like fall asleep. Literally fall asleep on one of the back tables. And I remember like, this is crazy. I mean, I didn't want to wake this person up, and but it didn't really matter because there was nothing going on in the casino. So, but just kind of weird to watch, odd to watch this person like just sleep. And there were times where I would go in the graveyard shift and I would be very, very tired, and I would almost fall asleep myself. And I would do my very, very best to stay up. I mean, I remember during the breaks, or when I got a chance to leave the poker room, I would go into the cafeteria and I would drink like soda, like caffeine soda all the time to keep myself up. And it sucked because after I got off the graveyard shift, my sleep patterns were so warped after that. And I actually had to come back in on day shift, so I had to come back at 9 a.m. like the following week. So I literally had like 2 days to recover. And I remember the first 2 days after that, I was like a zombie. I would deal, and then I would be tired. I would go home and just fall asleep and just collapse on the bed. And I told myself after that, I swore to myself that I would never ever work graveyard again if I can help it. And luckily for me, that was the only week I ever worked graveyard as a poker dealer. As soon as I worked during my time work as when I was part-time, actually what I call it extra board, when I was part-time, I had to work day shift. And when I got full-time status, I had to work day shift. And I've actually worked day shift full-time since that day. So what, mid 2005 till now, 2018, I've always worked day shift. And you know, sometimes the money is good on swing shift, but I learned that the lifestyle is much better on days. So I've never compromised that. And I remember every time I think I should take a shift where there's more money to me, like a late swing or a graveyard shift, I always think back to those 3 days I work a graveyard when I first started dealing, and remember how I was feeling and how terrible, like my sleep pattern was so bad and my lifestyle was terrible. I said, I'm never going to go through that ever again. And luckily for me, I never have. So, I mean, graveyard is good for some people, it's just not for me. The third and final story is a kind of initiation into poker dealing of what I would encounter, not to this extent, later on in my poker career. When you deal in a poker room, you come across regulars. And generally speaking, 90% of the regulars are very, very good people. They just want to go play poker and just not work. They talk to you, they be friendly. But sometimes you come across the 1%er who are total assholes, who are total jerks, who totally despise you, not as a person, just because you're the dealer. And they say things to you that, you know, they probably don't mean at the time, but then they keep saying it. So in your mind, you're thinking, yeah, I think they mean it. And there's this guy, he used to play in a room all the time. He doesn't play in a room anymore. He would come into work, he was like this miserable guy, and every time he would lose, he would blame the dealers, like all of us, not just me, everybody. And he came in like maybe during the day, late days, and he was just miserable. I mean, he was like, because he was like the top of the top of the gamblers, like how they treat, like there's a tier system, I guess, in a lot of casinos, and he was at the top because he was like a big horse better, and he would bet big money in horse betting. So every time he would have money on horses, he would come to the poker room and he would demand one of us turn the TVs to the horse racing so he can watch it. And this guy played in a room for maybe a year, 2 years, like almost every day. And we always dreaded dealing to this person. And I remember the first time I ever dealt to him was a day shift. And I got warned about this guy from other dealers, but whatever. I'm not going to be judgmental, whatever. But I got to the table and this guy was losing, and he was like, every time he lose, he would like stare at me, like a death stare at me. And I would look at him and I'd try to ignore him or whatever, just do my job. But he kept looking at me, and he kept losing, and he kept looking at me, and he kept losing, and he kept staring at me. And then one time he said, "So when are you gonna leave?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Well, I'm gonna be pushed here in about 10 minutes." And he goes, "Well, I hope when you get pushed, you go outside and get hit by a truck. No, get hit by a bus." He actually said that to my face. "I hope you get hit by a bus." And I looked at him and was like, did he just say that to me? And I was like, this is the beginning where didn't know how to handle the situation. I looked at him and he kind of gave me that look. And I gave him like this little kind of a angry stare, and he gave it back to me, but he didn't say anything. So I kept dealing, trying to keep my mouth shut. And then I got up. When I got pushed, I got up and I told the supervisor I need to go to the bathroom. But what I really wanted to do is scream, because I was so mad at this guy. Basically saying he wanted me to die in so many words. So I went to the down to the cafeteria, and I went to the bathroom. And I actually screamed. I yelled. I just screamed, and I'm sure somebody heard me. And I got up, and I still was like shaking, kind of angry about it. And I got back, and I was telling some of the poker deals about what happened, and they're like, "Yeah, he said the same thing to me." And other deals, "Yeah, he said that to me." And he kept doing it. And then finally, maybe a couple months later, he got banned from the poker room or whatever. And he hasn't been back since. Well, he's been back because they actually let him back in. So he's been back, but it's at the point where he couldn't say anything to any of us. So, because I guess apparently he was thrown out of every poker room in Las Vegas. So he basically begged our poker room manager to let him in. And he basically came back and had to behave himself. Couldn't say a word to anybody. But he would still do that death stare all the time. Just stare at you, stare well. But he could never say anything. And us poker dealers at the time, we took pleasure. I know I took pleasure in busting him, because he wasn't a very, very good player. But, he gave you that little death stare all the time. And what I learned from that is that people are going to treat you bad when they have no one else to blame. And when I first started dealing, whenever somebody would like blame me for something, I always took personal offense to it. And I learned throughout the years, in 12 years, it's not really about me when they blame me for anything. It's just the way they are. So now I'm to the point where somebody blames me, I take it. I don't worry about it anymore. But when like I said, when I first started, I took everything personally. And especially with this guy who, like I said, threatened, he wanted me to die. So anyways, this player has not played in our room since 2000, I want to say 2008, 2009, he has not been back. But he still plays in town. I've actually seen him around town. I'm not going to say where he plays at now. But let me just give you a little bit of hints, so just in case you are around poker rooms. The last time I saw him was like 2 years ago, and he was playing in a pot limit Omaha game, 1-2 pot limit Omaha. And as far as I know, he's still playing there. He's still playing that game. And he still looks miserable. He still acts like a jerk to the players and to the dealers. And apparently this poker room lets him act that way, because like apparently he dumps money to their pit or whatever, or to the horse racing. For me, I hope I never ever see him after that. And when I do see him, I try to walk the opposite direction, because I think I'm at this point where, I don't know, I just hope he loses all his money. Anyways, that is 3 stories from my first year of dealing poker. I've learned a lot since then, and I'm not the dealer I was back then that I am now. And in some ways, I'm glad I'm not. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Come back next week for another video in the life and the confessions of a low-limit professional poker dealer. Thanks for watching, everybody. And don't forget to comment below, subscribe, and tell your friends.